Hi there, welcome to my channel and to a slightly different video than my typical format. I have been studying for my degree in data science over the past couple of years, and this semester I completed my thesis project. And I wanted to share my final project. I'm very proud of it, and I think that it might resonate with some people in my audience because it does focus on literature, which is one of my greatest loves in life. I wanted to do a project that married my love for reading with my newfound love for data analysis. And so I chose to do a research project focused on Uncle Tom's Cabin and using computational text analysis to understand what modern day readers are saying about the book on Goodreads. I won't go too much further into the project as you'll get to learn all about it in my presentation, but I did want to come on first and give a few disclaimers. First off, there's a method that I use which I mispronounce consistently throughout my presentation, and that is Roberta. I say it Roberta, don't ask me why. It is called Roberta. It is a sentiment analysis method that I use in my project. So just remember, every single time I say Roberta, I'm actually meaning to say Roberta. I'm also sure I mispronounce what LDA stands for. That second word is a German word, which I looked up pronunciation guides for, and pretty sure I got it wrong every single time. I'm also going to include the tools and my references in the description of this video if you're interested in checking any of those out. I'm going to try to link to my full presentation as well if you'd like to go through the slides on your own time. And with that, it is a fairly long presentation, so I'm going to stop talking and let you enjoy learning about my research project. Hello and welcome to my senior thesis presentation. My project focused on analyzing thematic and sentiment patterns in Goodreads reviews specific to the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. Today we'll be going over an introduction about myself and some background on my research, the specific questions and hypotheses I was exploring in this project, a summary of key findings from literature review, my methods, including the dataset tools and methods used in the research, results from the project, interpretation and implication of those results, and finally a summary of the main findings and direction for future research that could result from this project. We begin with the introduction. If you're unfamiliar with me, my name is Faith Merle, and in the final fall semester of my bachelor's in data science, I enrolled in a course on natural language processing techniques. As an avid reader from some of my earliest memories, I deeply appreciated that course's application of computational analysis on works with which I had a lot of familiarity. That subject planted the seed for this thesis project. I have a soft spot in my heart for books. Literary analysis and even reading is often seen as a purely intellectual pursuit, limited to academics and elite members of society. But the rise of public sites like Goodreads or Storygraphs and online communities like BookTok and BookTube have decentralized reading, book reviews, and literary interpretation. This project was born from an interest in comparing what I was taught in school about a book, the meaning modern day readers have found in it, and my own personal experience with the piece of literature. As we look into the background for my research, the first item I want to present is a timeline. Specifically, a timeline for the history of slavery in America. This is a huge part of our history as a nation and as a people who champion freedom and equality. Our timeline starts at 1619, when the first group of enslaved Africans were brought to the Jamestown settlement in Virginia, and ends in 1870 when the U.S. Congress ratified the 15th Amendment. Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin entered the scene during a pivotal moment in which abolitionist ideas were no longer confined to thought experiments, and the presence and the idea of the nation going to war and the violence that would bring was on the horizon. Thus, the novel has held a place as a very politically and historically important piece of work, shaping the idea of Americans, specifically Northern Americans, and their thoughts on slavery and their interests and their value propositions for the Civil War that ensued just a decade later. It has continued to be taught in American schools for these reasons for over the past century. You might be asking, why apply computational methods to literature? Literary analysis has focused on traditional approaches of close reading, so the actual text itself and the language used and the style used, the historical context of the piece of literature, psychoanalytic or psycholinguistic emphasis, as well as social and cultural lenses. Computational analysis has arisen over the past several decades and has enabled text analysis around classification, looking at sentiment, topic, parts of speech, distant reading of large corpora, in other words, analysis that can extend beyond a single piece of literature, as well as word frequency analysis, very much focusing on quantitative approaches to text for very large bodies of literature that would be very time intensive as a human to review. This project sits at the intersection of these two approaches, focusing on reader response. It's the perfect intersection for traditional scholarship and algorithmic techniques, as we're studying a sizable data set to understand historical, social, and emotional interpretations at scale. I had two main hypotheses for my project. The first one states, contemporary readers of Uncle Tom's Cabin continue to engage with and recognize the novel's historically significant themes, as evidenced by the frequency and semantic presence of those themes in good read reviews. My primary research questions. First, which historically significant themes are most frequently mentioned? Are themes related to slavery, religion, injustice, and so on mentioned more frequently than themes related to writing style, pacing, or narrative structure? To what extent do emergent topics identified through topic modeling align with historically documented themes of Uncle Tom's Cabin? Do reviews mentioning historically significant themes correlate with higher star ratings? And are reviews that reference moral or emotional themes more likely to be positive than neutral or negative? My secondary hypothesis posits that positive reader sentiment is more strongly associated with moral and emotional themes, while negative sentiment is more strongly associated with stylistic or narrative critiques. I had two research questions for this hypothesis. The first being, which words or themes are most strongly associated with positive sentiment in the reviews? And how do sentiment scores differ between reviews focused on moral and emotional themes versus those focused on narrative or stylistic critique? We'll now jump into my literature review and summarize the key findings from existing research. Starting with sentiment analysis, specifically comparing two primary sentiment analysis methods, lexicon-based versus transformer-based models. Sentiment analysis classifies text as positive, negative, or neutral. There are two main approaches, the first being lexicon-based. The one I will be focusing on is called Vader, and this uses sentiment dictionaries to assign polarity. It is interpretable and computationally efficient and provides a strong baseline for large-scale analysis. Transformer-based sentiment analysis, this is a second approach. I focused on Roberta. This uses several different machine learning techniques to analyze text. It relies on feature engineering and has limited contextual understanding. Overall, sentiment analysis is widely used for social media, product reviews, and customer support settings to understand user reception. For our purposes, sentiment analysis will allow us to understand emotional responses to moral, social, and religious themes in Uncle Tom's Cabin. The dual approach of using Vader and Roberta modeling will allow us to balance simplicity with predictive power. Pre-processing arose as an important consideration. Things like stop word removal and lemmatization to normalize the data set will improve model performance. Another thing was contextual sentiment. This is why we're layering in Roberta to help understand the nuance and context-dependent sentiment in reviews. Vader will set our emotional baseline, and Roberta will review the fluctuations and outliers over the time frame of the Goodread reviews that we have gathered. Our next focus in the literature review is topic modeling, focusing on LDA and BERT topic, including their probabilistic foundations, embedding-based extensions, and evaluation strategies. Topic modeling is the unsupervised identification of latent themes in a body of work. It primarily focuses on grouping words based on co-occurrence patterns, and there are two major approaches. LDA, which is a probabilistic model and has very interpretable topic distributions, and BERT topic, which is an embeddings-based model and helps understand contextual semantic clustering. Topic modeling is a flexible framework shaped by pre-processing steps, parameterization, and evaluation. As we look at LDA, it uses probability distributions over words to identify topics. Its strengths include high interpretability, it handles overlapping themes, and it's well established and widely supported in literature. Challenges include requiring specific number of topics in advance. It is sensitive to parameter tuning, and it does ignore word order and context. BERT topic utilizes transformer embeddings and clustering. It is specifically strong at capturing semantic meaning beyond word frequency. It has higher coherence and less topic fragmentation in its approach. It's very effective for short and heterogeneous text, like the reviews we will be analyzing. BERT topic challenges include that it is computationally intensive and it does require significant tuning, depending on the use case. To summarize the main findings from our literature review on topic finding, model tuning is a key theme, parameter selection particularly being critical to LDA modeling to shape interpretability and results. Embeddings versus probability modeling is another consideration. Implementing BERT topic will allow us to explore more implicit or conceptual themes in our reader reviews. Model evaluation is also highly recommended to include multiple metrics, such as coherence, which looks at semantic consistency, diversity, which looks at distinctiveness of topics, and similarity, which considers stability across model runs. I also dove into existing literary scholarship on Uncle Tom's Cabin, particularly highlighting historically established themes that will inform this study's interpretation of computational outputs. Uncle Tom's Cabin has been recognized as a major literary and political text since its 1852 publication. As mentioned earlier in our timeline slide, it is situated within debates on slavery, Christianity, and national identity that were occurring at that time in American history. Key literary strategies include sentiment and emotional appeal, domestic imagery, and religious symbolism within the text. I found 4 primary themes that arose from literary scholarship. The first being Christianity and moral suffering. The main character, Tom, is our devout Christian figure who's guided by faith, humility, and sacrifice. He represents the moral framework of the novel, tying suffering with spiritual obedience and demonstrating forgiveness and prayer as ethical resistance. Theme 2 is racial representation and stereotyping. Stowe writes of slavery in very evocative vocabulary. She doesn't shy away from the dehumanization of slaves and the moral contradictions in white society that allowed the institution to persist. Scholars do criticize the author's reliance on stereotypes and romantic racialism. The third theme is reader empathy and emotional appeal. There's a lot of abolitionist messaging in the novel and critiques of slavery through moral and religious framing. There is broad appeal to audiences through those Christian values. And the novel itself had very significant cultural impact, shaping interpretations of slavery prior to the Civil War and positioning it as morally incompatible with American society and American democracy. The fourth theme is political influence and abolitionism. The novel employs emotional strategies focusing on family, home, and relationships to encourage identification with readers. Empathy functions to drive moral reflection and frame emotion as ethical engagement. There are some critiques in current scholarship about oversimplifying social realities, as well as the emotional versus structural approach of the novel. Overall, our literature review found that there is a methodological divide. Computational analysis scales well but lacks the historical and interpretive depth that literary criticism provides, whereas literary analysis, while rich, is not empirically scalable. There are limits on reader reception studies, as neither approach alone adequately captures how modern readers collectively interpret text. Computational gaps also exist. Topic modeling and sentiment analysis prioritize performance over interpretive alignment. And literary criticism on Uncle Tom's Cabin lacks large-scale empirical analysis of contemporary reader discourse. Section 5 is our methods. I'll be giving an overview of the dataset, tools, and techniques utilized in my research. The dataset included almost 11,000 Goodread reviews, filtered down to 9,140 English. This covered over 18 years of data from 2007 to January of 2026. And we collected 5 main data points: the username, star rating, review text, date, and number of community likes on the review. This slide covers our complete flow of data pre-processing. The first step is scraping the book reviews from the Goodreads website. We do this by finding the appropriate URL, entering the number of total pages for the reviews, and then the code scrapes username, review, rating, date, and number of likes from the website. These are stored as Goodreads_reviews in a JSON file. And we proceed to our step for removing non-English reviews. This uses the Python lang_detect library to associate a language with each review in the JSON file, and then we simply subset the data into English only and save that to a new JSON file. We perform some data quality checks to identify any missing values and validate expected data types. Those checked reviews are saved into a new JSON, and we move on to data normalization. We change the number of likes to integers, remove punctuation, white space, and special characters, lowercase reviews, and calculate character count and word count for reviews. Again, we save all of this information to a new JSON file. Our standardization step tokenizes the review text, removes stop words, and applies lemmatization and part-of-speech tagging. Our final cleaned and pre-processed dataset is saved to Goodreads_final_reviews.json. Data pre-processing matters significantly to our outputs to ensure consistency for modeling and preserving sentiment-relevant features. At a high level, our methods framework focused on breaking Goodreads reviews into into sentiment scores and topics, sentiment analysis specifically asking how readers felt and reacted to the novel, topic modeling diving into what readers discuss in their reviews. All of these models went through statistical analysis to understand how those findings related to star ratings, and then we pulled those findings into our results to digest and interpret. The primary goal of this research is to link themes, sentiment, and ratings to evaluate reader interpretation of Uncle Tom's Cabin at scale. The core methods for sentiment analysis include VADER, which stands for Valence Aware Dictionary and Sentiment Reasoner, is a rule-based sentiment analysis model designed for short, informal text and produces 4 outputs: positive, negative, neutral, and a normalized compound score ranging from -1, which means most negative, to +1, which is most positive sentiment. To capture contextual sentiment beyond lexicon-based rules, the Roberta transformer model was applied using the Hugging Face Transformers pre-trained model that was trained on a large corpus of Twitter data for 3-class sentiment classification: negative, neutral, and positive. This embeddings-based approach will enable contextual sentiment, will enable deeper learnings. This embeddings-based approach will allow us to see the nuance. This embeddings-based approach will enable nuanced representations of reader responses in addition to the baseline provided by VADER. Latent Dirichlet allocation, also known as LDA, was implemented as a probabilistic generative model in which each document is represented as a mixture of topics, and each topic is a distribution over words. In this framework, topics are treated as latent variables that probabilistically generate the observed words within each document. To complement LDA's probabilistic modeling, BERT topic was used to generate semantically informed topic clusters using contextual embeddings. Unlike LDA, which relies on word frequency distributions, BERT topic leverages transformer-based embeddings to capture semantic similarity between documents. I felt it important to discuss the evaluation and validation techniques we'll be using for these models to ensure that the findings align with traditional literary scholarship. For our sentiment model validation, we'll be using Spearman correlation, chi-square tests, and model comparison. Topic model validation will score coherence, stability, and diversity. And our statistical analysis will focus on logistic regression and correlation analysis across key variables. As a summary of our sentiment analysis metrics, we'll look at 4 components from our evaluation. The first being model comparison. Roberta correlates more with ratings, which means it is better at capturing sentiment aligned with user scores than our VADER model. If we look at the overall relationship between sentiment and ratings, we see a fairly weak correlation. In other words, sentiment alone is not a strong predictor of star ratings for reader reviews. In terms of model performance, our calculations for accuracy and F1 scores indicated that neutral/mixed sentiment was the most difficult for the models to detect. And finally, model agreement. This is where our Spearman correlation between VADER and Roberta came into play, and it showed a moderate agreement between the 2 models, meaning that they both captured slightly different signals in the data set of Goodreads reviews. Our final takeaway is that more advanced modeling techniques like Roberta did improve performance of sentiment analysis, but sentiment alone does not fully explain the user ratings within the data set. This slide presents a summary of topic modeling metrics. For LDA, we reduced to 5 topics through iterative parameter tuning, and we achieved a topic diversity score of 0.76, topic stability score of 0.5559, and the model with the best coherence achieved a score of -1.4759. Per topic, we managed to reduce to 18 topics through iterative parameter tuning as well, and the best model achieved a topic diversity score of 0.7889, topic stability score of 0.4430, and a coherence score of -1.8814. We'll now move into the results for this project to discuss our findings and supporting visualizations from the research. Initial analysis of the dataset considered the length of reviews based on both word count and character count. Overall, the review length is highly variable. The mean was 98 words, median 47. There is a very strong right skew, meaning most reviews are relatively short. From this, we can conclude that the dataset is a mix of brief reactions with some detailed critiques from specific readers. As we look at the initial star rating distribution, we can see that 88% of reviews are greater than or equal to 3 stars, 73% of reviews are 4 or 5 stars, and ratings increase gradually. We can see at first glance that reviews demonstrate a broadly positive, consistent reception from readers. A preliminary look at the temporal distribution of reviews reflects both platform growth and sustained reader engagement. Because our dataset spans the full lifetime of Goodreads from its launch in 2007 to the dataset being pulled in January of 2026, the first and final years represent only partial periods, resulting in the lower review counts at those boundaries. Excluding these edge years, annual review counts remain relatively stable, ranging from 354 to 620 reviews per year. Overall, the temporal pattern suggests steady and gradual increase in reader engagement over time, rather than a short-lived surge in popularity. The consistent volume of reviews across more than a decade indicates that Uncle Tom's Cabin also maintains ongoing relevance among readers. Initial analysis also looked at keywords in our dataset to highlight what readers are talking about. We see that slavery in historical context appears quite frequently, as well as religion and morality, character discussions, and the literary style of the novel. How do readers feel about the novel? This is where we discuss our sentiment analysis results. Table 7 shows the percentage of reviews from each model that fall into the 3 sentiment categories. The majority of reviews are positive. Negative review is present but smaller in scale, and neutral is the least common. Figure 14 shows the distributions of Roberta compound sentiment scores. In terms of sentiment validation, across both models, higher rated reviews generally correspond to more positive sentiments. We looked at Spearman rank correlation coefficients, and they did confirm a statistically significant monotonic relationship for both models. Roberta specifically captured sharper distinctions between sentiment levels as shown on the left in figure 16. Roberta aligns better with the ratings, as it captures the nuance and negative tone more consistently than Vader. What themes emerged from reviews? The table on this slide shows the 5 topics identified from LDA. They align closely with the thematic framework established from our literature review, demonstrating that contemporary reader discourse does reflect many of the core concerns identified in literary scholarship. We have our topic around writing style and narrative critique, slavery and human suffering, political influence and historical setting, plot points that resonated with readers, and Christian morality, particularly as it is personified in female characters. Comparing our LDA and BERT topic results, we found that LDA was very stable and interpretable and captured canonical themes. BERT topic was more granular and reader-focused. It helped capture context and nuance in reviews. Table 6 maps the major themes between LDA and BERT topic. And we see very consistent findings overall. Again, slavery and human suffering being a major theme in reviews, historical and political context, Christian morality and faith, abolition and freedom narratives, and then diving into individual reader experiences with the emotional impact and empathy, narrative critique and writing style, reader reception, and some critiques readers had of the novel. As we look at the interaction between sentiment and theme, we see sentiment vary significantly by theme. Moral and emotional topics were generally more positive, while stylistic critiques reflected a generally negative sentiment. However, it is important to note there is high variability within topics, so we cannot deduce a simple one-to-one relationship. We also considered changes over time. Figure 22 shows how sentiment scores fluctuate over the 18-ish years of data that we have. And figure 22 looks at our topic groupings of moral, stylistic, and other, and how frequently those have appeared in reviews over time. Generally, we see that themes remain fairly stable, while sentiment does become less positive, which we can take to mean that modern readers are more critical and or reflective of the novel. As we summarize key findings, we first realize reader discourse aligns with historical themes. Overall reception is fairly positive. Sentiment varies by theme. LDA plus BERT topic provide complementary insights. And reader interpretations are fairly stable but evolving. Overall, our results tell a very clear story. What people talk about hasn't changed significantly. How they feel about it has. This will lead us into a very interesting discussion, and as well as implications for the results of this research. Again, it's important to highlight the persistence of core themes, specifically slavery and racial injustice, Christian morality, and emotional suffering. These themes are highly frequent, semantically coherent, and consistent across models. This means readers are actively engaging with the novel and its messaging, and that the novel's moral framework does remain meaningful to modern-day society. The consistency of these patterns across both probabilistic and embeddings-based models further supports the robustness of this thematic structure. Altogether, these findings provide strong support for our primary hypothesis, demonstrating that contemporary reader interpretations remain closely aligned with the novel's historically recognized themes. Looking at the modes of reader engagement, we find there is a dominance of moral and historical engagement. Readers are deeply aware and communicative of Uncle Tom's Cabin's place in the cultural and political history of the United States. The presence of these ideas in reviews of various sentiment indicate an active reader engagement rather than purely descriptive reference. There's a secondary emphasis in reviews on stylistic critique. Such critiques look at the narrative structure, pacing, and writing style, demonstrating that readers engage with the novel not simply as a moral text, but also as a literary artifact subject to critical evaluation. There's also character-based interpretation throughout reviews. These discussions particularly involve Tom, Eliza, and St. Clair, indicating that readers frequently interpret the novel through individual narrative experiences. As we look closer in comparing our sentiment models to ratings, we see that Vader has more positive classifications and is less sensitive to context and implicit tone in reviews. Roberta includes more negative and neutral classifications. It does a better job at capturing nuance, irony, and subtle critique in reviews, meaning it is better for complex literary language. Rule-based and transformer models produce systematically different sentiment interpretations, so using both models provided us a more complete picture of reader sentiment. LDA, as mentioned previously, was a very stable and reproducible model. It gave us clear, interpretable topic distributions, like the one shown for topic 1 in this word cloud, and it was less sensitive to nuanced language. BERT topic, on the other hand, captured significant semantic nuance and indirect meaning. It was better for complex discourse that was found in reader reviews, and it was less stable, meaning it was more sensitive to changes in model parameters. It produced significantly more topics than LDA, which were all more granular in nature, as demonstrated in the word cloud presented on the slide. There is a trade-off between stability and semantic richness within topic modeling, so the best approach is to combine both modeling approaches to allow for a comprehensive analysis. We'll now summarize the main findings and direction for future research. This study shows a few things. First, large-scale reader reception can be analyzed empirically. Second, computational and literary methods together reveal new insights. And third, contemporary readers actively reinterpret canonical text. Again, our research questions and hypotheses focused first on themes, asking whether readers still engage with historical themes, and sentiment, asking if sentiment varies by theme. Our first key finding is around thematic continuity. We found over this research that core themes persist across time, meaning that readers continue to empathize with and discuss on a large scale similar ideas as presented in the literary scholarship we saw in our review slides. This chart specifically looks at the themes pulled from our BERT topic model over time from 2007 to January of 2026. And you can see that generally, despite some peaks and valleys, these themes have appeared in reviews with great frequency over almost 2 decades. Our second key finding is around sentiment patterns. The key takeaway being that reader sentiment is mostly positive, but nuanced. Vadar again produced more uniformly positive scoring, while Roberta captured more nuance within reviews. Our third key finding is around theme and sentiment relationship, highlighting that what readers feel depends upon what they discuss. Moral and emotional themes generally tended toward more positive sentiment and scoring. Stylistic critiques were more negative in nature, showing us that readers balance ethical engagement with literary judgments of the novel. There are some broader implications for this work. We have implications for literary studies, as this research contributes to literary scholarship by demonstrating that reader reception can be examined empirically at scale rather than inferred from selective examples. By analyzing large collections of reader-generated discourse, it becomes possible to identify how contemporary audiences interpret canonical texts and which themes remain most culturally relevant. We also have implications in the space of digital humanities. Methodologically, this study illustrates how computational approaches can complement traditional literary analysis. Topic modeling enables the identification of large-scale thematic structures, while sentiment analysis captures patterns of effective response amongst readers. Together, these methods extend the scope of literary inquiry by allowing scholars to analyze interpretive trends across thousands of readers rather than individual texts alone. Finally, we have implications for understanding canonical literature and its place in culture. The findings from this project position Uncle Tom's Cabin as an ongoing site of ethical interpretation within contemporary reader discourse. At the same time, the presence of stylistic critique reflects the influence of modern literary expectations on reader evaluation. These patterns indicate that canonical works remain interpretively active, shaped by an ongoing interaction between historical meaning and present-day cultural perspectives. So what happens next? There are opportunities for expanding the scope and comparisons included in research like this project explored. One being looking at additional platforms. While the findings of this study provide meaningful insights into contemporary reader reception, they also point to several avenues for further research by incorporating reader reviews from additional digital platforms like Amazon, Reddit, Library Thing, different online forums, and YouTube comments, for instance. Each of these platforms hosts distinct interpretive communities with different norms of engagement, levels of formality, and audience expectations. Expanding the dataset across platforms would enable comparative analysis of how reader interpretations vary by context, potentially revealing differences in thematic emphasis, evaluative tone, and modes of literary discussion. Such an approach would provide a more comprehensive understanding of contemporary reader reception beyond a single platform. We could also look at cross-text comparisons. The methodological framework developed in this study could be applied to other historically significant literary works, including the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, Beloved, and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Comparative analyses across texts would allow researchers to examine whether similar thematic structures emerge across different texts depending on the narrative, the historical context, and the authorial perspective. Such a line of inquiry would contribute to broader efforts to understand how canonical literature is collectively interpreted within modern reading communities. Further research could also look at topic and sentiment integration. While this project analyzed thematic patterns and sentiment in parallel, future work could further integrate these approaches by directly modeling sentiment within individual topic clusters. For example, researchers could examine the distribution of positive, negative, and neutral sentiment across Christian morality and suffering, or slavery and racism, topics that we found in Uncle Tom's Cabin. This would enable more precise identification of which themes elicit the strongest emotional responses and how evaluative tone varies within and across topics. Such integration would deepen the analytical connection between what readers discuss and how they respond, enhancing the interpretive power of computational literary analysis. There are also several methodological enhancements that could be considered to increase the analytical precision of this project and similar research efforts. First is around improved NLP models, so advances in embeddings-based models and different natural language processing techniques offer opportunities to improve the semantic precision of topic modeling and the contextual sensitivity of sentiment analysis. We could also look at better evaluation metrics. A development of more robust metrics for topic coherence and stability, for example, would strengthen the reliability of thematic interpretation. Integrating computational approaches with quantitative analysis, such as close reading of representative text, could also further enhance the interpretive validity by grounding large-scale patterns in textual evidence. Altogether, these methodological improvements could support more rigorous and nuanced applications of digital humanities research. More time could be dedicated to temporal and dynamic reception analysis to study how reader reception changes over time. This research could ask questions such as, how do interpretations evolve? Does cultural context impact reader reception? And how does a book's meaning shift over time? Our final takeaways. First, canonical texts are not static. Second, readers actively reinterpret meaning. And finally, computational methods reveal these trends at scale. Fundamentally, our cultural context influences what we write, which influences the people who read it, who then shape the culture, and the cycle repeats and repeats. By implementing computational methods, this study revealed these patterns at a scale far larger than is possible within traditional literary analysis methods. Thank you so much for your time and attention today to this project. I hope you found the research interesting and the findings compelling. I look forward to hearing your feedback.